My name's Logan, and I just turned 30 a few months back. I guess if you saw me now, clean cut, tailored blazer, Porsche keys dangling from my fingers, you'd think I was one of those guys who had everything handed to him. But nothing could be further from the truth. Because while some people grow up in families that lift them up, mine had a talent for reminding me, in 100 little ways, that I wasn't the chosen one. That title belonged to my older brother Jake, 2 years older, smug as ever. And from the moment we were old enough to walk, my parents made it clear which one of us was destined for greatness. I was 16 when I got my first job. Saturday mornings at a local hardware store, stacking bags of mulch and learning how to use a box cutter without slicing my thumb open. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I remember the first time I came home with a sore back and dirt under my nails. My mom glanced up from her phone, gave me a once-over, and muttered something about how she never thought we'd raise a laborer. My dad just chuckled and said, "At least someone's learning the value of hard work." That might have meant something if he hadn't followed it up with a comment about how Jake was busy working on his mind instead of wasting time on minimum wage. Jake, at that point, hadn't worked a single day in his life. He didn't even pretend to look for a job. He spent his weekends gaming in the basement or hanging out with friends, blasting music through his expensive headphones that I knew my parents had bought him. They always had some excuse for it. He's focused on his future. He's got potential. We don't want to distract him with money problems. And maybe that would have made sense if he was acing his classes or inventing the next big thing. But he was coasting through high school, barely passing, and somehow everything was always someone else's fault. His teachers didn't like him. His assignments were too vague. The curriculum was too rigid for his creativity. Meanwhile, I was pulling B's and the occasional A, working weekends, and saving every penny I could toward a beat-up Toyota I found listed online. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from a double shift, drenched in sweat and starving. I'd worked 12 hours straight because someone had called out sick, and I needed the overtime. As I walked in, I heard laughter from the kitchen. Jake was sitting at the table with my parents, animatedly telling some story. I don't remember what it was. Probably another tale about how his professor just didn't get him. What I do remember is what he said when I walked in. "Oh look," Jake smirked. "The weekend warrior returns. Did you beat the boss level at aisle 9 yet?" They all laughed. My mom laughed the loudest. My dad gave me this half-hearted, "Hey bud," before turning right back to Jake. I just stood there for a second, dirt still on my boots, wondering how it was even possible to feel like a stranger in your own home. I was covering for Dan. "He's got a kid," I muttered, grabbing a glass of water. Jake snorted. "You know, most people your age are out partying, meeting girls, doing normal stuff. Not hauling lumber for a living." "I'm saving up for a car," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "You know, so I don't have to ask mom and dad to drive me around." That should have landed, right? But instead, my mom just gave me that look, the one where her lips press into a thin line, like I was being difficult again. "Logan," she sighed, "don't be jealous. Your brother's on a different path. You should be happy for him." "Happy," I said, and I could feel my face heating up. "For what? That he doesn't lift a finger while I work every weekend and still get mocked for it?" Jake leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. "Hey man, I'm just saying, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with scraping pennies, you'd have a little more fun. You know, live a little." Something snapped in me then. Not all at once, just a hairline fracture. But I felt it. And once it started, it only spread. I didn't argue. I didn't throw my glass or storm off. I just looked at him, really looked at him, with his smug little grin and his brand new hoodie, and I thought, okay, you win. You're the golden boy. I'm the worker bee. But somewhere deep down, I made myself a quiet promise. Let's see where we both end up in 10 years. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every word, every chuckle, every dismissive glance. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just planned. And over the next few months, that plan became my fuel. But at the time, none of them knew. They just kept laughing. And Jake just kept coasting. And I kept working. But I stopped waiting for them to notice. Because one day, I knew they would. And when they did, it wouldn't be with a handshake. It'd be with a rearview mirror and the sound of my engine purring as I drove away. But back then, all of that was still years away. What came next? Well, that's when things started to shift, slowly at first. And it all began with a simple envelope on the kitchen counter. one that had my name on it, and not his. I wish I could say the envelope held a golden ticket, that it was the start of some fairy tale turn, a scholarship, a job offer, an anonymous gift telling me, "We see you, Logan." But life doesn't do grand reveals like that. It was a financial aid notice from the community college I'd applied to. A cold, folded piece of paper reminding me that even if I could cover tuition with my savings, I'd still need to work full-time to make rent and keep the lights on in the shoebox apartment I'd just found online. But to me, that envelope was a declaration. I'm doing this alone. It was freedom in ink and bureaucracy. I didn't even show it to my parents. There wasn't a point. I already knew the script. Jake was going to state. Not just any state school, the big one. The one with the football stadium that looked like a spaceship and tuition fees that made your stomach drop. He didn't apply for aid. Didn't need to. My dad marched around bragging about it like he'd built the school brick by brick. My mom hosted a dinner to celebrate Jake's big brain and made me take the trash out mid-toast. "Don't glare, Logan," she whispered as I grabbed the garbage bags. This is Jake's moment. Jake's moment somehow became his season. Suddenly, he was treated like some hometown hero about to solve world hunger. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, added more shifts at the hardware store, and quietly planned for September. I'd already accepted my place, the invisible son, the one who held doors open and vacuumed the living room before guests arrived, then disappeared so Jake could shine. But the breaking point didn't come from one moment. It came from 1,000 tiny ones. Death by 1,000 sighs, eye rolls, and subtle insults. It's funny how pain builds. It doesn't knock you over at once. It erodes you. Slowly. Until one day, there's nothing left to chip away. It was a humid August evening, 2 weeks before Jake was set to move into his dorm, when it all collapsed. I'd just finished a closing shift and came home to find the living room cluttered with bags, boxes, and enough electronics to open a mini Best Buy. My parents were arguing over whether Jake needed a second monitor for his creative projects. He was stretched across the couch, phone in hand, one sock on, eating chips straight from the bag. "Hey, Logan," my dad called. "We need your help loading the car. Jake's new stuff." I was still holding my backpack, sweat plastered to my back. "Can I eat first?" Jake looked up, smirking. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a few boxes. You act like you're working in a mine." I didn't reply. I set my backpack down and started grabbing boxes. Microwave, mini fridge, monitor. All new, all expensive, all bought for the golden boy who had never worked a day in his life. I caught a glimpse of one receipt sticking out of a bag. Over $2,000, just for move-in expenses. That was more than I'd made all summer. Later that night, after I'd helped haul everything into the garage, I went to grab a sandwich from the fridge. As I reached for the bread, I heard Jake laughing on the phone in the den. "Bro, Logan's still stacking boxes for beer money. He thinks community college is like Noble or something. Dude's acting like a martyr for showing up to work on time." Pause. Then more laughter. "No, man, they're not helping him. My mom says he made his choice. They offered to help if he went to state, but since he wanted to be independent or whatever, they let him figure it out himself." Kinda hilarious. I stood there, bread in hand, heart frozen. They offered to help me? That was news to me. I waited until he was done. Waited until I heard the telltale, "I'm starving," grunt followed by him heading upstairs. Then I walked into the den and sat in Dad's armchair, staring at the blank TV screen, its black surface reflecting a version of me I didn't quite recognize anymore. I didn't know who to confront first, but it turns out I wouldn't have to, because the very next day, I found out what betrayal really felt like. I came home from work and found the kitchen filled with relatives, cousins, uncles, even my great-aunt Irene with the raspy laugh. Balloons tied to the chairs, a cake on the counter, gold foil letters that spelled "Congrats, Jake." My mom spotted me and clapped. "There he is. Logan, you're just in time." "For what?" She blinked. "Jake's surprise dinner. We're celebrating early. He's leaving for orientation tomorrow." Tomorrow? No one had told me. "Yeah," she said, brushing flour from her apron. "We figured you'd be working anyway." The cousins chimed in. "Jake's gonna crush it at state. Future tech mogul. Man, I wish I was that smart." Someone nudged me. "You going to school too?" "Community college," I said quietly. "Oh," they replied, as if I'd said kindergarten. Jake came downstairs in a button-up shirt and jeans. His hair was freshly cut. Mom handed him a card. Everyone gathered. Dad put an arm around him. This, Dad announced, is what we always knew was coming. A man who'll make a difference. He's got potential, the kind you can't teach. It's just in him. Jake grinned. Thanks, Pops. Then Mom handed him another envelope. This is from us. For expenses. He opened it and whistled. Whoa, this is a lot. We believe in investing in the future, she said, beaming. I felt something twist in my stomach. Later, after dinner, I found the envelope crumpled on the side table. Curiosity got the better of me. I peeked inside. A check. $5,000. I stood there, holding it like it was radioactive. My pulse thudded in my ears. 5,000. The same people who told me there wasn't enough to help with rent, or books, or even a basic laptop, had just handed Jake $5,000 after buying him every gadget in the store. I didn't speak to anyone that night. I didn't sleep, either. The next morning, Jake left for college. The house was weirdly quiet without his playlist thumping from the basement. I spent the next year grinding. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at the college library, evenings at a nearby diner. I took 18 credits per semester and learned how to live off ramen, canned tuna, and day-old bread. I didn't go to parties. I didn't take spring break trips. I didn't even own a decent pair of shoes. My soles had holes the size of quarters by December. But I stayed focused. I built up my GPA, joined the honors program, started tutoring, and applied for every internship I could find. Jake, from what I could gather through social media and overheard phone calls, he was flunking 2 classes by the end of the first semester. He blamed the professors, naturally. Switched majors twice. Partied hard. Burned through the $5,000 by November. Called home weekly for emergency money. They kept sending it. Meanwhile, I patched my sneakers with duct tape and hoped the library copier wouldn't jam again. And then, the final twist of the knife. Spring semester, I got an offer. A real one. A paid internship at a major marketing firm downtown. They liked my portfolio, my work ethic, my grit. The woman who interviewed me said, "You're not like the others. You've had to hustle." That shows. I was over the moon. I came home that evening, eager to share the news. Maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud this time. My mom was on the couch watching TV. My dad was reading the paper. "Hey," I said. "I got the internship. The one with Catalyst Media. Downtown. Paid. Full-time this summer." They looked up. Mom nodded. "That's nice." Dad lowered his paper. "But what about school? I can do evening classes. This is a huge opportunity." He grunted. "Just don't lose focus. Not everyone can coast forever like Jake." That was the first time he'd even hinted that Jake might not be living up to expectations. But then came the gut punch. "Well," my mom added, "maybe now you can start paying for your own health insurance. We've been covering you both." My mouth went dry. "I've been paying mine for over a year." She blinked. "Oh, right. Must have been Jake's then." I nodded slowly. Then I walked out. That was the last time I tried to make them proud. From that point on, I stopped asking, stopped hoping, stopped waiting for applause. I started building something they wouldn't understand. Something mine. And as I grew, slowly, quietly, I watched Jake unravel. You'd think landing a paid internship in the middle of college, one that actually aligned with your career, would be the beginning of everything turning around. In a way it was, but not right away. Because when you grow up being told you're second best, invisible, even, you don't just shake that off the minute someone else sees your value. You carry it, quietly, like a stone in your chest. Even as things start looking up, you keep glancing over your shoulder, wondering if someone's going to take it all away. Tell you it was a mistake. Remind you where you really belong. That's where I was when I started the internship at Catalyst. I didn't have the right clothes. I wore thrifted button-ups and pants one size too big, held up with a belt that had 3 extra holes punched in it. My laptop was so old it wheezed every time I opened a browser tab. I couldn't afford parking downtown, so I took the bus every morning, then walked 7 blocks to the building. Rain, heat, didn't matter. I showed up. Every single day. Early. The office was all glass walls and open space, the kind of place where people actually enjoyed what they did. It was intimidating at first. Everyone had crisp clothes and fancy watches, and they moved like they'd always known they belonged there. Except me. I stayed quiet at first. Did my work. Took notes. Listened more than I talked. But slowly, I started noticing something. No one cared where you came from. They cared how you carried yourself. How you showed up. How much you cared. So I gave it everything. I offered to stay late, took on side projects, asked smart questions. When one of the senior strategists needed help organizing a campaign outline, I stayed until 9 p.m. reworking slides. She didn't even ask me to. I just saw her drowning and jumped in. The next day, she handed me a latte and said, "You've got an eye for this. You ever consider doing this full time?" I smiled. "Every day." She laughed. "Good. Keep going." That summer changed me. Not in the loud, cinematic way people expect. There was no slow-motion montage or everything falls into place moment. But piece by piece, I started rebuilding. Not just my resume, but me. I got better at speaking up, at trusting my gut, at believing, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't just the kid hauling mulch and stacking screws to survive. I had ideas, vision, and slowly, people started listening. By the end of the internship, Catalyst offered me a part-time assistant strategist role, remote, so I could finish school. It wasn't huge money, but it was mine. No handouts, no applause, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd earned every inch of it. Meanwhile, Jake's updates had gone from loud to silent. At first, my parents wouldn't shut up about him. His dorm, his friends, the amazing philosophy professor he had. Then the story started changing. He'd switched majors again, not vibing with econ. Said he needed to explore his options. By sophomore year, he dropped 2 courses and moved into an off-campus apartment. I overheard my mom complaining on the phone one night. He said he needed a quiet space to focus. But now he's asking for more money. Logan, can you believe that? And after everything we've already spent. I kept washing my dishes. She never asked how my classes were going. That was fine. I'd stopped expecting it. One night, around midterms, I got a call from Jake. That was rare. "Hey," he said. "You still good with resumes and all that marketing junk?" I blinked. "Yeah, why? Think you could help me out? I'm trying to apply to this startup gig. They want someone with brand development skills. I figured you'd know what to write." That's Jake for you. No, how's it going? No mention of how I got into the industry. Just the assumption I'd drop everything to help. I wanted to say no. God, I should have said no. But part of me, the part still hoping for a scrap of recognition, said yes. I spent 2 hours rewriting his resume, tightening the language, formatting it properly. I even gave him tips for the interview. He didn't even say thank you. Just sent back, "Got it. We'll send. Let you know if it works." Spoiler, it didn't. Turns out, confidence without follow-through doesn't get you very far. A few weeks later, I found out he'd failed 2 more classes. My parents bailed him out with more money and a lecture that I'm sure lasted no more than 10 minutes. "He's just under a lot of pressure," my mom told me. "He's got potential, Logan. It's just taking time." Still waiting on that potential, I thought, but I didn't say it. Instead, I went back to work. Finished my associates with honors. Applied to transfer to a 4-year university with a strong communications program. Catalyst wrote me a glowing letter of recommendation. I got in. Full ride. It felt surreal. I remember standing in the middle of my crummy studio apartment, holding the acceptance letter in one hand, my cracked phone in the other. I didn't even know who to call. I thought about telling my parents. Then I remembered Jake's last emergency. He'd overdraft his account buying speakers for his apartment. My mom Venmo'd him $200 without blinking. I crumpled the letter and threw it into the air like confetti. Celebrated alone. Made grilled cheese. Sat on the floor and watched the letter flutter down. That fall, I moved to the university dorms. They weren't fancy, but they were clean. I had a roommate who kept to himself and a campus job that covered books. I stayed on part-time at Catalyst remotely and started building a freelance portfolio on the side. Small businesses, personal brands, musicians looking to promote albums. I learned how to build websites, run ads, write copy that actually converted. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about Jake. Not out of bitterness, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't have space for him. I was busy living, busy building, busy becoming someone I never thought I'd be allowed to be. Until one afternoon, everything came rushing back. It was around Christmas break. I'd just gotten back to town and was meeting a former professor at a downtown cafe. As I waited outside for her, sipping lukewarm coffee, I felt a tap on my window. I looked up. Disheveled hoodie, dirt-streaked face, hair like it hadn't been washed in weeks. "Spare change, man." His voice was cracked. Familiar. I blinked. "Jake." He froze. His eyes widened, and for a second, I saw something I'd never seen on his face before. Not arrogance. Not amusement. Shame. He stepped back like I'd slapped him. I got out of the car slowly, heart racing. What? What happened to you? He looked down. It's been a rough year. A rough year. He nodded, barely meeting my gaze. Dropped out. Tried some gigs. Startup didn't work out. Then the lease ran out. Parents said I had to figure it out on my own. I stared at him. They cut you off? He nodded again. They said, if I couldn't take responsibility, they wouldn't keep enabling me. The irony hit me like a wave. Now they set boundaries? Now, after all the money and excuses and he's just under pressure? I looked him over, the frayed sleeves, the worn-out shoes, the way his jaw clenched like he was trying not to cry. And then I realized something. This wasn't the version of him I'd fantasized about. This wasn't the smug jerk who used to mock my work boots and call me pathetic. This was a hollow shell. But the part that shocked me most? I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt sad. He opened his mouth to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe another excuse. But before he could, my phone buzzed. A text from my Catalyst supervisor. Client loved the pitch. They're signing. You nailed it. I looked back at Jake. He was still standing there, shivering slightly in the wind. I didn't say anything. Just smiled. Not cruelly, not smugly. Just honestly. Still waiting on that potential? His face crumpled. And in that moment, I knew. I had finally, truly let go. But don't get me wrong. That wasn't the end of it. Because the truth? That cafe wasn't just a random spot. It was the first meeting for a deal that would change everything. I didn't hear from Jake again after that day outside the cafe. I didn't call, didn't text. I didn't even tell anyone what happened. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I had nothing left to say. That moment, him standing there in a worn-out hoodie asking me for spare change, wasn't just an emotional climax. It was a revelation. It was the moment I realized I'd already won the war. But the war wasn't against him. It was against who I used to be. And that guy, the kid desperate for approval, the one begging to be seen, was long gone. What came next wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was something cleaner, sharper, strategic. See, I didn't want to get even. I wanted to make a statement. One so loud and undeniable that no one, not Jake, not my parents, not the extended family that had spent years pretending I didn't exist, could ever look through me again. And the opportunity? It practically fell into my lap. A month after the cafe moment, I got an email from my Catalyst contact, Melissa, the same strategist I'd helped with that late-night presentation years ago. She'd moved on to a new company, a fast-growing creative agency with a bold reputation and an even bolder client list. She said she'd been following my work, saw the freelance brand strategy projects I'd done, the small business transformations, even the niche viral campaigns I helped design during grad school. Want to consult for us? She wrote. Temporary contract. High-profile client. Possibly long-term. I said yes before I finished reading the email. Turns out the high-profile client was a new VC-backed food startup trying to disrupt the online grocery delivery market. They had funding, a scalable model, and no brand identity whatsoever. No logo, no voice, no direction, just a cool name and a boatload of investor pressure. And they were desperate for a brand strategist who could take raw chaos and turn it into something clean, trustworthy, and viral. Enter me. I didn't sleep much that month. Between the consulting gig, wrapping up classes, and keeping up with my Catalyst duties, I ran on 4 hours a night and enough coffee to stun a horse. But I was in the zone. I lived for the deadlines, for the chance to build something real. The startup loved my work, so much so that they extended the contract indefinitely and began feeding me more influence in their internal meetings. That's when I started noticing something odd. One of their marketing interns, a guy named Nate, kept referencing a branding guy they'd hired before me. Said he had flaked, left a mess behind, wasted time, blew through a small budget, and left the startup scrambling before launch. I didn't think much of it until I saw one of the early pitch decks buried in a shared folder. The name on the bottom of every slide? Jake. I stared at it for a solid minute, not breathing. Of course he'd tried to break into this world. The same one he mocked me for years ago. The one he called boring marketing junk. And of course he'd failed. Because branding isn't about buzzwords and fonts. It's about people. And Jake never understood people unless they were handing him something. I didn't say anything to the team. That wasn't my style. But I did quietly clean up every trace of his work, reorganized the entire pitch, rewrote the copy, rebuilt the visuals from scratch. When we presented the new direction to investors, they loved it. One of them even called it a complete 180 from the last guy. I just smiled. And that's when the idea came to me. Not a childish prank, not a shouting match, an opportunity to show everyone exactly what I'd become, not out of spite, but out of undeniable, visible, unshakable success. Here's what I knew. Jake was back in our hometown, still bouncing between couches, still making excuses, still waiting for someone to hand him another opportunity he hadn't earned. And my parents? They were quieter now. The bragging had stopped. No more, "Jake's going to change the world" phone calls. No more updates. Just silence. Until, one day, my mom called me out of the blue. "Logan," she said, trying to sound casual. "How are you, honey?" I almost didn't recognize her voice. It had been over a year. "I'm good," I said. "Busy." "Oh, that's great. I saw your LinkedIn. You've been doing well, huh?" I didn't reply. I let her squirm a little. She cleared her throat. "Listen, your brother. He's going through a rough time." There it was. The real reason. She gave me some vague story about how Jake had lost a few opportunities and was trying to find his footing. I nodded through it, sipping my coffee. Then she dropped the kicker. "Do you think you could help him out? Maybe put in a word at one of your companies? Just until he's back on his feet." I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I said, "Let me think about it." And then I got to work. See, I wasn't going to hand Jake a job, but I was going to build a stage big enough that when I finally stepped on it, the whole family, especially him, would have no choice but to look up. I started pulling strings. That food startup, they were launching nationwide. I pitched a full-scale digital campaign, complete with branded pop-ups, influencer tie-ins, and a short-form docuseries about modern food culture and tech disruption. They greenlit it, with me as creative director. It was the break of a lifetime, and I wasn't wasting it. I poured everything into that campaign. Design, strategy, storytelling. I hired a small team of hungry, underdog freelancers like me. Folks who'd been overlooked, underestimated, told they weren't polished enough. Together, we built something raw and real and addictive. The campaign went viral. We got featured in 2 major industry magazines. Our trailer was retweeted by a celebrity chef with 10 million followers. Suddenly, people were calling me. Startups, agencies, investors. They wanted the guy who built that. But it wasn't about the clients. It was about the next step, the big one. So I took a portion of my savings and made a move. I leased an office downtown. Clean, modern, glass walls like Catalyst, but scrappier, hungrier. I called it Ember & Company, a boutique branding firm for underdogs with fire. And I hired 2 full-time staff, plus 3 rotating contractors, all people like me. Hustlers. Kids who didn't go to Ivy League schools, but knew how to build magic out of chaos. The day the sign went up, that's when it really hit me. I'd done it. Not by chasing approval. Not by begging for a seat at someone else's table. But by building my own. And then, I invited the whole family to see it. I planned a launch party. Nothing huge, just enough to make noise. Local food. Custom cocktail menu. Portfolio wall with framed campaigns. And on the invite list, my parents. A few aunts and uncles. Even Jake. I didn't expect them all to come. But they did. They walked in looking dazed, like they'd accidentally wandered into someone else's success story. My mom kept adjusting her purse strap. My dad tried to act impressed, but couldn't stop glancing at the price tags on the wall art. Jake came in last, wearing a borrowed blazer and the same smirk he'd worn in high school. "Nice place," he said, looking around. "Thanks," I replied. Did it without a single handout. He winced. But I wasn't done. "Want a drink?" I asked, gesturing to the bar. "We've got something special tonight. A little toast to underdogs." He followed me. The room buzzed with clients and press and curious friends of friends. I stood by the mic stand, raised a glass, and cleared my throat. "Thanks for being here," I said. "Some of you know my story. Some don't. But I'll keep it simple. This company was built by people who were told they weren't enough, who were mocked for working weekends, who were told to be happy for someone else's potential while they scraped together a future." I glanced at Jake. He looked away. "But the thing about potential," I continued, "is that it only matters if you use it. And sometimes, the real game changers aren't the ones born with all the advantages. They're the ones who never stopped grinding." The room clapped. Jake stood there, red-faced. And me? I smiled. Because this wasn't revenge. It was proof. But trust me, I hadn't even played my final card yet. The party ended the way most of them do, with laughter, clinking glasses, and guests slowly trickling out under warm yellow light. But the energy was different. My parents left early, polite smiles masking the confusion they couldn't quite hide. They looked around my office like they were walking through someone else's life, someone they couldn't claim. My dad gave a stiff pat on the back. My mom whispered something about being so proud, but the words felt hollow, like she didn't know how to say them anymore, or maybe had never meant them in the first place. Jake lingered. Of course he did. He hung around the bar, sipping from a bottle of IPA he probably couldn't pronounce. His blazer sleeves were too short, his smile too wide. He was fishing for a lifeline. I knew it before he even opened his mouth. "You really built all this?" he asked, gesturing around the room. "Yeah," I said. "From scratch." "Crazy, man. I mean, it's impressive. Really. I didn't think you'd, I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think I'd what?" He held up a hand, laughing nervously. "No offense. I just mean, you always seem so focused on working and studying. I figured you'd burn out. But hey, guess you proved everyone wrong, huh?" He said it like it was some kind of compliment. Like he hadn't spent half our childhood calling me a loser. "Guess I did," I replied flatly. Then came the pitch. "I've been thinking," he said, setting down the beer. "Maybe it's time I get serious too. Do something real. Maybe start over. Get into branding, like you." I didn't say anything. "So," he continued, "I was wondering if you had any openings. Just freelance, even. I've got ideas, man. I just need a chance." There it was. The ask. It took everything in me not to laugh. Because the final piece of my plan was already in motion. And Jake, poor, clueless Jake, had just handed me the perfect opportunity to deliver it. "Actually," I said, pretending to think, "there is something you might be perfect for." His face lit up. "Seriously? Dude, I'd owe you big time." "I've got a client," I continued. "He's launching a new subscription box, luxury grooming for men. Think high-end razors, skincare, that kind of thing. Wants to target college guys. But he needs someone who really understands the demographic. Someone who can help him with tone, voice, even video content." Jake leaned in. "I can do that. Easy." I smiled. "Figured you'd say that. I'll connect you. But fair warning, he's intense. Real perfectionist. If you screw up, it reflects on me. So don't screw up." Jake puffed his chest. "You won't regret it, bro." But I would. That was the point. Because the client didn't exist. Well, not in the way Jake thought. A few months back, during my early freelance days, I'd built a dummy brand to test market engagement. Valorcrate, a fictional men's grooming company that never launched. The brand had a full identity, logo, colors, fake product renders, a website, a newsletter with 12 pre-written entries, and even a dead-end Shopify page. Just a shell. But it looked real. So I resurrected it, updated the logo, refreshed the copy, and then I crafted a fake identity. Brent Wexler, founder of Valorcrate, type A, fast-paced, obsessed with image. I created a burner email, an AI-generated profile pic, and even a fake LinkedIn account. It was disturbingly easy. Then I had Brent reach out to Jake. The emails were short, clipped, professional. The tone? Cold. Jake responded like a golden retriever chasing a stick. Brent assigned him small tasks at first, sample tweets, fake ad scripts, mock slogans. Jake sent them back with endless emojis and hashtags, clearly trying too hard. Brent replied with vague encouragement and more tasks. Then came the real kicker. Brent sent Jake a contract, fake, of course, that included a clause about compensation being performance-based after a 90-day trial period. Jake signed it without blinking. For 3 months, I kept him running in circles. Mock-up after mock-up, concept after concept. Each time he'd ask about payment, Brent would reply with corporate jargon. "We're finalizing budgets, waiting for series of funding. Legal is reviewing invoices." Jake swallowed it all. Because he wanted in. He wanted the lifestyle, the respect. He wanted what I had. But you can't shortcut character. You can't fake discipline. And Jake was faking everything. Around week 12, Brent told him there'd be a live investor pitch, a chance to prove himself. Jake panicked. He begged for slides, bullet points, anything. So I, as Brent, sent him a pitch deck. It was full of red herrings, buzzwords with no meaning, fake stats, broken data links, slide titles like Vision Synergy 4.0 and Customer Domination Matrix. It was nonsense, and I told him to present it solo, to an investor friend of mine. The meeting was set at a co-working space I'd rented for the afternoon. I hired an actor, clean-cut, mid-40s, with a no-nonsense face, to play the role of Marcus Chun, a venture capitalist from Stone River Capital. I gave him a script, told him to act confused, frustrated, skeptical. Jake showed up in a wrinkled dress shirt, holding a flash drive and sweating through his collar. I watched from the other room through a glass wall. He bombed. Every slide confused him. The stats didn't add up. The actor kept interrupting with questions Jake couldn't answer. Who is your target demo again? Why is your retention rate based on fictional projections? Why are there 2 slides labeled slide 5? Jake stammered, apologized, tried to recover, but by the end, Marcus just shook his head and said, "We'll pass. Best of luck." Jake left crushed, and I walked into the empty room 15 minutes later and picked up his forgotten flash drive. It had the words "Final Pitch" scribbled in Sharpie. I almost felt bad. Almost. But the fallout wasn't over. The next day, Brent emailed Jake. "This trial was disappointing. We're terminating the contract, effective immediately. Do not contact us further." Jake responded with a flurry of desperate messages. What did I do wrong? I thought we had something. Can we talk about this? I never replied. Instead, I sent one final email, not from Brent, but from me. Subject line: still waiting on that potential? No body. Just an attachment, a screen cap of Jake's own words from years ago, a Facebook comment under one of my high school photos. Logan thinks he's such a big shot for working at Ace Hardware. Pathetic. You'll be folding boxes forever, bro. Meanwhile, I'll be making real money with my brain. LOL. The silence afterward? Deafening. I didn't hear from Jake for months, but I did hear from my parents. The next time my mom called, her voice cracked. "Jake's not doing well," she said. I stayed quiet. "He's different now. I don't know how to reach him." I wanted to tell her it wasn't now. Jake had always been that way. She just hadn't looked hard enough. But I didn't say it. I let her sit in the silence. The final act of revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was a mirror, held up so they could see the truth they'd spent 2 decades ignoring. Jake wasn't the victim. He was the result of constant praise without performance, of love without limits, of potential without action. And me? I'd been forged in the fire they left me in. Now I stood above it. Clear. Whole. Unapologetically me. Somewhere, Jake's probably still chasing shortcuts. Still waiting for the next handout. Still blaming the world for not bowing to his greatness. But I'm done looking back. Because the truth is, I didn't destroy Jake. He just finally caught up to the version of himself he'd been running from all along. And me? I kept driving. Porsche humming. City lights blurring past the windshield. My life, finally mine. No apologies. No more looking over my shoulder. And for the first time in forever, I didn't owe anyone a thing.